And we are back, and we finished watching 2023's Past Lives, rated PG-13 with a runtime of 1 hour and 45 minutes. This is the directorial debut of Celine Song, who also wrote the script for this really, really lovely film. I really enjoyed it. We just caught it on Showtime. Did I say that already?
If you didn't, yeah, it's on Showtime.
Yeah, it's on Showtime. Not the app, because apparently we can't get the app anymore because I think it's tied to Paramount
I mean, it's
Plus.
probably on the app. We just don't have access to it.
Yeah, we just don't have access to it, which sucks. But it just aired on Showtime. I think there's a couple other airings of it. So if you are paying for basic cable or whatever tier cable we have, I guess check it out. This is the story of Na Young, played by... not Greta Lee, but Greta Lee is an adult, but a young girl who's living in Korea who has, I guess, her best friend, Hae Sung, and they're sort of like childhood sweethearts.
Mm-hmm.
And one day, Na Young realizes, or she's informed by her parents, that they're going to be moving to America. Her parents are
Canada.
I guess Canada, right. So her father is a film director. I think they said, and the mother was a writer, something like that. I think Nayam, or her, I guess her American name is Nora.
Mm-hmm.
She becomes a playwright as an adult. And initially, I guess they lose contact. And then 12 years after she had left Korea, they somehow find each other through the power of social media and begin
she finds out that he actually asked about her.
Yes, right. She sees that he made a comment on her father's Facebook page.
So she reaches out to him.
So she reaches out to him, and they
an online relationship because he lives in
Korea.
Seoul and she now lives in New York.
New York, right. And then I guess it becomes a little too intense, and she sort of balks and asks him to not reach out to her anymore. And from here, she meets a man who will eventually become her husband.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think?
I thought it was good. It's a pretty complex story, very, I guess, complex relationship between Na Young and the guy whose name I will probably butcher. What is it?
Song.
Hae Sung? Okay.
Haesung.
Mm-hmm. It wasn't like she said, "Don't talk to me anymore."
Mm-hmm.
I don't want it to come off like that. It was basically, I think at that point she realized, because before she says that, she's like, "When will you ever be able to come down here?"
Right.
And he
basically says a year.
He basically says
and
like
she
a year.
Says
she basically says a year and a half, and she's got something going on that's going to take up like 6 months to a year, and it just always seems like it's just not meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of, she seems very practical. Like,
yes, very practical.
Of the two, she is definitely the more practical one, and he is the more emotional one.
Yeah.
And being practical, and I guess seeing sort of like the writing on the wall here, it's like you could tell that they are in love with each other through just this discourse, this online discourse, but it's a love that can never really
be.
That can never be, because it's geographically impossible. And I think maybe later on when she's talking about like the cultural differences, he's very Korean. Koreans have this very sort of like structured, or I don't know, a very...
Yeah, when she was talking to her husband about him, she said everything about him was Korean, right? The way he was manly in a Korean way. He had Korean ideology.
He still lived with his parents, which is a very Korean thing.
Yeah, she mentions that too.
He's very stiff and awkward. It's very different from Nora. Mm-hmm. And while they're having this online discourse, it's clear that he's never going to come to America. Mm. And I don't think she ever wants to go to Korea. So it's like this, I think I described it as like an unrequited love that's not really unrequited, but just, it's not going to work. Mm. It's just not going to work. In this inyon, as they call it, they are attached. Mm. They are part of each other's lives, but
she's the one.
Not this isn't.
Leaves.
It's not this life. This is not the life that where they become or they're together.
Right. Right.
Maybe next time. Maybe in the past, but not this one.
Right.
And so she's the one who basically pulls that Band-Aid off and she says it in a way that's sort of like, yeah, let's take a break.
Yeah.
Let's not communicate with each other for 6 months. We'll see.
I don't know if she gave it a number, but she
did.
She
did.
She said 6 months.
She gave it a time limit, but I when she said that, I was just like, bullshit.
Yeah.
Nothing's gonna happen.
Yeah.
And they go their ways, and you could see there's a point where he's about to, I guess, break silence, but then he stops himself.
Right, and he's like, okay.
When he's on the train. He's like, I'm going to send her a text message or something. And they move on with their lives, and they find other partners, and another 12 years pass, and suddenly he's going to finally come to New York for a visit.
Yeah.
And then we have the rest of the movie.
And it felt like, I mean, it's not really elaborated, but it felt like maybe he broke up with the girlfriend at that point to have this sort of clean slate when he was coming to America. Although he knew already that she was married. He knew that Nora was married.
Yeah, I mean, he basically made some bullshit excuse about... I don't know. Maybe maybe it's not bullshit. Maybe it's a cultural thing. But he was saying that as an only child, I'm supposed to have more money and more prestige in what I do for a living before I get married.
Right.
In my mind, it was just to me. It sounded like
he's making excuses.
He's making an excuse, and basically what he's really trying to do is let's just take a little break. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna see if this
can ever happen.
This childhood love that I've had for this woman who's always been on my mind for the past 36 years.
24.
Well, they were 12. They were childhood friends, so.
But they weren't in love their whole lives. They were probably I guess they.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a little over 24 years now, and just see, hey, maybe let's find out what's there before I commit to the old ball and chain in Korea.
Back home.
Yeah.
I always got the impression that Hae Sung was more invested in that relationship than she was.
Yes.
I felt like he's the one that initially reached out. I felt like he was the one that actually got on a plane and came here to see her. I mean, she'd gone to Korea with her husband to visit family, but she never made any kind of attempt.
Yes, she did. She did, and he didn't answer her.
But that was before she got married, right? Or when she was married. I don't remember. You're right.
She went there with him.
With the husband.
And she sent him she sent Hae Sung an email, but he never replied back.
Got it. That's right.
But what you were saying, yes, he's definitely more emotionally invested. Like I said, he is the emotional one. She is more practical. If he'd never contacted her again, she would never have even probably even thought of him.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not until she sees him that I guess feelings start coming back or reemerging.
And it's interesting because the first time they meet by that little merry-go-round, is that the first time that they meet or whatever?
They go to the merry-go-round. The first time they meet is somewhere in Manhattan.
Right. But then it's when they're at the merry-go-round, catching up, there's so much awkward silence.
There's always so awkward. The minute they meet each other, it's awkward. He's like, what do I say?
Right. They kept saying "whoa" to each other.
Yeah. Well, that was a callback to when they first speak online.
Yeah.
But yeah, when they first see each other, he's almost taken aback when she hugs him.
Yes. Yeah.
Like she puts her arms around him, and his arms are bolted to his sides.
Yeah.
Because he is really rigid. Mm-hmm. He doesn't. I think he just does not know what to expect.
Sure.
And on top of that, he has this
idealized
version in his mind of her that he's been in love with since he was a 12-year-old boy.
Yeah. And also, she is married.
Yeah.
So it further complicates things. I really, really enjoyed this. I mean, I think that it's different and it's about love and love lost and what if kind of thing. But I think that the ending, to me at least, I won't give it away because I feel like this is still playing in theaters and it's a fairly recent film, but I feel like even the ending was just very melancholy, but it felt like this was the correct way to end things, or the way to end the story, I should say.
Yeah.
And it's not a traditional Hollywood ending. It's not what you think is going to happen. It's a very slow movie. There's really nothing audacious or crazy that happens as far as story goes. It's just a very linear, straight line kind of thing. But it's told and it's filmed in a way that felt very rooted in like the human experience, but also from someone who is incredibly in tune with the concept of love loss and this yearning for this other person. Like, it very, very, very much showed that to me. And I feel like that's kind of like a hard thing to do, but it's done very well here. From the minute that you meet Hae Sung, you know that he loves Na Young. Right? It felt like he always had this attachment to her, and she did to him. They go on their little 12-year-old date, but if anyone's carrying a torch, it's definitely Hae Sung, and he doesn't really deviate from that. He's, like you mentioned, he's got like this idealized version of her, and like
I said, he's rigid.
He's very rigid.
He grows up the same way, whereas Na Young
she's come here.
She's like, this is the situation I'm in. I'm not going to wallow in it. I'm not going to mourn it. I'm just going to accept the situation and try to make the best of it. When I get there, I'm going to win the Nobel Prize, and I'm never coming back. And she says that even when she says that when she's 12, and she says it with such conviction. And you see, when she's saying it, his heart's like just breaking. It's like that episode of The Simpsons. He's like, "Look, Lise, you could totally see the moment when his heart rips in half."
Gosh,
it's literally that moment in that classroom.
Yeah,
and then he has to walk home with her.
Right,
and it's funny because he like stops her for a minute. He's like, "Hey," and she's like, she turns around and he just says bye and leaves.
Right.
And they sort of like call back to that at the end as well.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, oh, it's a kind of a do-over here, but this ain't that kind of movie.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And it's funny because I think I turned to you towards the end and I'm like, well, I mean, I guess we're speaking to, I don't know, are we speaking to spoilers? Maybe we should do numbers and then speak to spoilers.
Don't save any spoilers for later, but I was going to say something now. I can't remember. Weren't. The ravages of age.
Well, we're talking about how, like, when he was a child and the call, like, walking her home, and then, like, he's going to say something, but then I guess he thinks the better of it because, I mean, she's leaving with her family, and it's not like anything can be done about it, right? Yeah. So he just says goodbye, and then you said there was like a callback to it later, which happens, right?
Oh, that it's not this kind of movie. And the funny thing is that her husband, when they're in bed, he's like, this is that in this story, the childhood sweethearts reunite after a long time. I'm the bad guy. I'm the evil American fiance who's standing in the way of their happiness. Mm-hmm. And yeah, if this was a typical Hollywood thing, that's exactly what. If this was produced by Lifetime, he would be like this like mustache twirling douchebag.
Yeah.
Who's like secretly cheating with the caterer or something.
Yeah.
And just like, oh, I'm just marrying her for her money. Yeah. And then the childhood sweetheart comes in and saves the day and punches him out at the end. And then they hop into his Ford Bronco and sail off into the American flag.
So I want to speak to spoilers. So can we give our numbers now?
Yeah.
What would you give it?
Oh, you go first.
I really enjoyed this. I mean, I know that this is now a couple of days after the Oscars. I know that Oppenheimer was voted as the best film. I don't know. I haven't seen it yet. But this, to me, so far, of the movies that were nominated that I've seen, I really, really like this a lot. I'm going to give this movie an 8.5.
I mean, I thought it was okay. I'd probably just give it a 6.
Really?
6 is okay.
It's better than a 6.
Yeah, it's okay.
whatever. All right.
It wasn't, I mean, it's, I do like that it's a very complicated thing, but it's definitely, don't watch this if you're looking to find something that's like super entertaining, because it's not. It's sad. It's
very sad.
It's very sad. It's very complicated. I mean, seriously complicated. There's no bad guys in this movie. It's just people being people, and especially two people living in a very complicated situation. And I guess if you're more cynical, you could basically say stuff like, oh, well, Hae Sung, he should have just gotten over it. He should have just moved on with his life. But it's not always going to be that cut and dry with people. I mean, Na Young, she seemed to be moving on with her life, but even with her, it was like this sort of like thing when she sees him, it's like the feelings all come back.
Right.
And
she is that little girl.
She's that little girl, and you feel the way you feel. It's not like she didn't love her husband. She did. And she's like, she made her choice in life. She's not going to regret those choices. But yeah, there's a little bit of, I guess, what if? I mean, the past lives, the whole thing. It's like, in another life, maybe we were the happy couple, or maybe I was just a bird and you were a branch I was sitting on.
Yeah.
It's just,
I like that scene a lot.
Yeah.
The different ways they would have been together.
And maybe this is the past life, and what's the next one going to be like?
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah. All right, 6.5. How about that?
It's better than that. It's better than that.
It's a good movie, but it's not going to wow you enough where you're just, well.
I don't agree with that. I feel like if you really sit and think about this, if you've ever had your heart torn out of your chest, I think that you'll take something away from this. I think that this is one of those situations where people can really love each other, but it just isn't meant to be. And I think that that's okay too. But there's sort of like this sense of loss and devastation at the end that is sad. And I think that, okay, well, I'm going to speak to spoilers. So if you don't want to listen to this, I advise you to turn this off now, because I'm going to deep dive on this, because I feel like this story is just really, really good. It is complex, but I think at the same time, I think it felt very rooted in the human experience, and I could see these things happening, and I could see those words being said throughout, even from like the husband character. I think it was just really just masterful, and I am so horribly impressed that this is a first-time director and writer of a film. This looked like it was filmed by someone who had been doing this a long, long time. The shots are lovely, the backdrops, everything, the story, the story flowed well. This isn't a very talky type movie. There's a lot of silence. There's a lot of silence in this film, but the dialogue that you do get is very, very good. I mean, one of my favorite scenes in this story is the three of them at the bar, and Nora and Hae Sung are just talking together in Korean, and they're talking about the ways in which they could be together in another life. I so love that so much. And then
not like be together, just like how their lives, because that's the whole thing about that inyon. It's not always a romantic thing. It's just that you have met in a previous life. So that's why it's a bird on a branch, or two people who happen to be sitting next to each other on a train, or a queen and the king's bodyguard, or something.
Yeah, henchman.
Like that. Henchman. It could be anything. So it's not about them being, it's just them encountering each other for 8,000 past lives. Right.
But I still feel like he would have liked to have had a romantic relationship with her.
I mean, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the biggest regrets of his life, that he couldn't have that in this life. And that's why he turns to her afterwards and is like, oh, maybe in our other life, we've already found that spot to be together in. And she replies, I don't know, which I thought was very interesting. And then another thing that I kind of wanted to call out was I guess when she's in bed with her husband and they go through kind of their origin story as a couple, it didn't seem romantic at all. It
was practical.
Yes.
Everything was practical, which is a hallmark of her life. She is practical. She is not the emotional one.
Right.
I remember I was telling you, it's like, or all the men in this thing are just completely insecure. It's funny. The scene when they're in bed together, even the way
Nora and her husband?
Not the one where there's like one scene where they're in bed together and he is in like if you watch any other movie where a man and a woman are just like laying in bed together talking, he is in the position that a woman usually is in. And she is in the position that a man is usually in. She's definitely she has the more masculine energy. She's like laying on her back, just sort of like looking up at the ceiling. And he is sort of like on his side with his arm and his leg draped over her body. So yeah. Any other movie, it would have that would have been flipped over, yeah. Like his bare leg. It was just like, she's definitely the
dynamic one.
Yeah.
I found that interesting because I felt like, again, this is all open to interpretation, and that's another thing that I really loved about this film. I feel like as a viewer, you can take things from this and internalize them and process them to your own way, because there is ambiguity in the script. And I felt like there was ambiguity in the story. And even at the end, let's talk about the ending where she walks him to where he's going to get his cab. And then she walks home and her husband's waiting for her. And then she starts crying. And like that really struck me because in my mind, I'm like, okay, is she upset because he's leaving, or is it because this is technically the end of any kind of relationship with him? Like he'll go back to Korea. They'll probably never communicate again. And is she mourning the loss of that tie to this other place that she came from, or this other life that she lived? Is it that, or is part of her now? Because even you mentioned it, like by seeing him, it sort of shakes her and renews these feelings that she had for him, because he was her first love. Nothing happened because they were children. Not children, but they were like 12-year-olds. So nothing really happened. But if you've ever been in love, that first love, it's always so all-consuming that a lot of it lingers. You might not remember it. You might not really think about it too much, but it's so powerful the first time. Everything is so powerful the first time because it's the first time that you're living through something like that. So the heartbreak of that first love would obviously be devastating and something that gets carried. She did a good job of like continuing and just keeping on with her life. But at the same time, it felt like, was she really living her life, or was she just going through the motions? Was she so focused on her ambition of winning a Pulitzer or a Tony or whatever Nobel Prize that she lost sight of the fact that she's a human being with thoughts and feelings and love and the need to be loved, and there's passion there. And as a creative, you would think that there's passion there, but something about her just felt very mechanical. But it felt like when Hae Sung was there was a light that went on in her. Yeah.
There is that line. I think there was a line. Basically, she says something along the lines of "You always made me cry" or something like that. Basically, in my mind, it was just Hae Sung made her feel actual emotions, and otherwise, she was, like I said, just very practical, and it was sort of. Yeah, that's throughout pretty much her whole life. I'm not saying that she was emotionless, but like that strong a love was something that she pretty much just put away. She just sort of like in her mind, it's just, I'm going to put it in this box and not really think about it anymore.
Right.
And she did. I don't think that it was a loveless marriage. Then when they showed them together, There was basically them getting together and their life together, and it seemed like a very nice, nice, loving marriage, but not. I guess it's just different. It's a different type of love.
Right.
And Hae Sung just made her feel that way. And yeah, at the end of the film, I guess it's sort of like a mourning for the fact that it's just not meant to be, at least not this time around.
Right.
Yeah, so she cries, and her husband consoles her about it. So, was very nice.
Right. But also very strange, because it's like...
Well, we're definitely not used to seeing that in a movie. Usually this is like, this drove a wedge between us that was never resolved until we became bitter enemies at the divorce court. Nah.
Well, I think that's another reason why I like this film so much, because these are topics that we don't really see a lot in films, and the way it's handled here is very masterful. I mean, Celine Song, the filmmaker, is young person, and yet they seem to really have a handle on the landscape of this whole idea of loss and love and longing and this constant thinking of what if. And I felt like this movie really did an outstanding job in portraying those topics. Like, it's easy for like boy meets girl, boy loses girl. I mean, I feel like those stories are told all the time, but this particular one, there's more to it. There's layers to it. There's nuance to it, and it's different. It's not your typical movie.
Yeah,
I mean, do I love this more than Eternal Sunshine? No, obviously not. But this is an interesting retelling of a story that we've seen many, many times. The story of...
Well, I think like what you were saying, it's like a what if, but it's sort of like a what could have been, but I like what I have now.
Right. But is it, do I like or do I love? I mean, there's a difference between the two. And that's the thing
love enough where you're just not willing to
jeopardize,
to give everything up. There was no way on earth she would ever go live in Korea.
I agree.
None. And I don't think there was any way he was going to live in America.
I agree. So
if circumstances in their upbringings were different, this probably wouldn't have been an issue. But what is. What happened. And
right.
She was just the more practical of the two, whereas he sort of let it hang over him for his entire life.
He definitely romanticized this idea of her.
Yeah, he said he thought about her all the time when he was in the military.
Right.
And yeah, I don't think he had any relationships with anybody.
No.
Not until she basically, like I said, tore that Band-Aid off, and he went to the Mandarin or China to learn to speak Mandarin.
Right.
And then he met a girl.
Right. And
yeah, I think the lives that they ended up having, they were good. It was like I said, this isn't some sort of shitty Lifetime movie where it's
no.
It's they married an evil person with ulterior motives who beat and cheated on them and did all this other crap. They were going to live probably wonderful lives. It's just this was a very strong connection between the two of them.
Right.
And knowing that it's dead, or not really dead, but that it there's a full acceptance, a finality that nothing is going to come of this.
Right.
So yeah, it finally, I guess. Remember I said she threw that sort of love away in a box somewhere in their mind.
Right.
This is her finally getting rid of the box, I guess.
Right.
Or excising it from herself.
So you think it's at the end when she cries, when she's walking, or when she walks home and she cries to her husband, do you think it's because she's come to the realization that this is the final...
It's kind of like the tears she should have shed when she was 12 years old and 24 years old, when it ended both those other times. And she didn't, because it was just sort of like, I got to do what I got to do. I got to move to, I got to emigrate with my parents. I got to go to Montauk and go to this writer's retreat. Seriously, she went. Did she look forlorn?
No, not really. No.
She went there. She made herself at home, and she immediately hooked up with Arthur.
Yeah.
So, yeah, she was definitely not really
mourning,
fully processing these separations, especially for somebody that she had such a deep connection with, to the point where the instant she sees them, it triggers something in her. And it's not ridiculous. This is absolutely not your typical Hollywood romance where they just like they're staring at each other or something, and it's like not an awkward staring, but like they're biting lips and stuff like that. Yeah. Blushing. Nothing like that. It's just there's just something there.
I have to also shout out the scene in the bar, I guess, with her and him and the husband sitting there kind of lost because he doesn't really understand the language, although he did say a couple of things in Korean, so I wonder how much of that conversation that they were having he did or did not understand. It would have been interesting to see his vantage point. But between that and then I guess waiting for the Uber ride, like those two conversations really, really touched something in me and just really propelled this movie more. And I think that those character moments are very, very well done. Very well done. The actors do a bang up job. The script, like I said, it's pretty Spartan, but what you do get is very impactful dialogue that propels the story to this next level experience. I really enjoyed this a lot. I really, really enjoyed this a lot. And I feel like the more time, I mean, we just finished it, but I feel like if I ever watched this again, and I plan to, just probably not right now, but I think that this is one of those movies where you can find new things or you can find new interpretations of the things that have happened, because it, much like life, it's not predictable and it can get messy and sometimes it hurts. So I think these are all emotions that the characters feel. Like even Arthur, he's got that scene where he voices his insecurities and it's masterfully handled. And even Nora has to reassure him that he's her husband.
Yeah.
I really, really enjoyed this. And like I said, I think it's a love story, but it doesn't have a happy ending. And we don't usually see a lot of that, but this is done in such a meaningful and impactful way that I think that if you gave it a chance, I think that you could walk away with something. Do you want to add anything else?
No.
All right. So you gave it a 6.5, which I think is terrible. But
fine, I'll give it a 7.
All right, that's better.
Make you
better.
Happy.
Thank you. I mean, you should be giving it an 8. But no, I'll take your 7.
It's not an 8.
I disagree. I think while we were watching it, I sort of made a comparison of her and the Sandra character in Anatomy of a Fall. They're very they have like this laser focus of where they want their careers to be, to the point where they maybe even don't pay attention to their personal lives. And I think that it shows in both. You see the ambition here for Nora, and you also see it in Anatomy of a Fall for the Sandra character. But it's interesting how this one, you get those extra little things, and at the end where she cries is really, really well done.
It's an interesting comparison. I don't think that these women focus on something to the detriment of their partners or their relationships. I just think that traditionally we have gender roles in our minds, and women are supposed to be the more nurturing, whatever. In both those cases, I did not feel that they were neglectful of their partners at all.
No.
I just feel that the partners, because they were more driven and less, there was something else in their lives other than, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to take care of you. Your hiney's red. I'm going to rub your butt. Oh.
Where the hell did that come from? You weirdo.
Yeah, but it's because it wasn't like that, because maybe that's what they're used to. Mm-hmm. When it's not to that level of nurturing, then they may see it as, oh well, she clearly doesn't care about me, and it's not the case at all. It's just now we're seeing these characters that aren't just this one facet. Oh, I must take care of my partner. I must rub his hiney.
This is such a weird example you're using.
I know. For some reason, I'm thinking of like Vince Vaughn in Anchorman. when he's taunting the news team. Okay, let's skip the hiney rubbing.
That's all you.
But yeah, because they are not as nurturing, or they're not solely focused. Like, instead of it being 100% this nurturing force, now it's like split 50-50 between, I have interests too, and I'm also taking care of you as well. And on the guy side, it's just like, well, I'm taking care of you. I'm a big, strong man. But now they feel like, well, I'm not getting 100% back from you.
Yeah.
And in their mind, it's sort of like, it's just doom. It's sort of like, I say that you have like this charisma about you. Mm-hmm. And people naturally like that. So that's why you have so many cases where people just like instantly think they're your best friend. But then if you take that away, mm-hmm. even a little bit, it's sort of like amplified. Okay. And that's the sort of, in my mind, that's sort of the same thing that's going on with these characters and these men in these movies. Is the female character isn't giving them what they want. It's sort of like they took a little bit of that nurturing away, and now they're becoming hypersensitive about it. And seriously, that guy in Anatomy of a Fall, oh my God. Yeah. He was blaming her for everything. And she's just seriously just explaining to him, these are your choices. Yeah, I'm actually encouraging you to do your own thing. I'm supporting you in your choices, and some, but you're not supporting me. Right. And it's like, okay, yeah, you're a bitch. You're a bitch. Exactly. It's and I'm not saying that Arthur was a bitch in this. No, not at all. But there was the moment where you could see his insecurity sort of welling up. Right. It came full force. It was coming up because he was just like a little bit unnerved by the fact that there's this other guy now who was her childhood sweetheart, and
he asked her like, is he handsome?
Yeah, as a creative who's been obviously working in crafting stories. I mean, seriously, the stories you all see is exactly what he described. He is the bad guy in this fairy tale. Sure. So yeah, I think that in both those cases, it wasn't that they're neglecting anything. It's just that they're also doing their own thing. They have drive and purpose outside of the relationship. Right. And in a traditional sort of role, especially when we were little growing up, that you'd see on TV, it was the mom really didn't have a career or anything. She was a housewife. Right. Yeah, right. She was there to take care of everybody. And you remove some of that focus, and now suddenly it's, you're neglecting us. Yeah.
What did you think of the ending? What was your take on the ending?
I mean, I thought that's exactly how it should have went.
No, I agree. Like, I think that if I would have been super, super annoyed if the ending was different, if she chose Hae Sung over her husband. I think that. Yeah. I appreciate it.
Like, there was a hot second where I was like worried she was just going to suddenly get in the over with him. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that would have just been a shit Hollywood ending.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was...
Why do you think she cried? Was it because... Tell me again. What did you say?
I said these are the tears that she should have been shedding.
When she was younger.
When she was 12 and when she was 24, when she was basically ending the relationship, or the relationship was ended for her. She never had that moment. She never had that release.
But did she know that it was ultimately over at 12 and 24? I get the impression that...
I mean, it should have been.
It should have been, but I get the impression that at 12, I think she mentions like, I cried. Because obviously she misses her past life. Life with Hae Sung, with her friends, with her country, with her family.
She cried because he beat her in a test.
Yes, there was that, but I think that was probably more layered in something else. And I think that she probably at this point knew that her family was thinking about moving, because in that scene where you're panning and you see the parents, it looked like they had already started packing their stuff. Mm-hmm. So I wonder at the end when she's walking back after leaving him at the Uber, when she comes back to where she lives, her husband's waiting out there for her, and he comes down and he embraces her, and she starts crying, and then it almost like the roles flip, right? Because he's the one that's holding her, that's comforting her, and she's just standing immobile, like just completely unable to give him any kind of idea of what's going on. It's just that she's so in her feelings right now. And I wondered in that moment, again, it's not explained, and I think that's great. I like the idea of, as a viewer, having my own kind of storytelling going on. But I wondered as I watched that scene, was she crying because she realized that this is ultimately the end, that even if they do see each other, nothing would ever come from it? Or was she crying because the finality, which is sort of what I just said before, the finality of the two of them, and that there would never be any possibility? Because I think that maybe there was a hope in her that he would come to her, but she wasn't banking on it and she wasn't waiting around for him. She kept living her life, and that's how she goes to the retreat, and that's how she meets Arthur, and that's how they form their own happily ever after. But when she's relaying the story of how, or when they're talking about how they met, it just seems so clinical and just so, there was nothing dynamic or exciting about it. It was just, they sort of fell into this relationship. They sort of moved back together because, what was it? Because they wanted to save money, and then they split the rent. They got money. So, they got married. They got married so that she can get a green card. So there was all these, like, it wasn't because it was like, I feel this burning, passionate love for you, which is what you would think in a marriage. And even like when she's telling the husband, like, oh, I'm just going to walk him down so he catches his Uber, I turned to you and I was like, well, that was interesting, because I know that even if I'm going up the block to the skifo, like, I would kiss you goodbye. And I know that you would do the same thing to me. So it's like, to me, when I see stuff like that, and maybe that is the norm, but that just doesn't compute in my brain. It's like, you're in a relationship. You're supposed to be in love with your partner. And it's like, it didn't feel that way.
That level of love was, like I said, just locked away from, it was Hae Sung's, it belonged to him.
Right. But that's what I mean. So was she her most authentic self with Hae Sung? Because it felt like when she was with him, even with the awkward pauses and stuff, there was something about her that glowed. And I don't know if that was the case with Arthur.
I don't know if it's a thing of most authentic self. I just think it's that emotion. Mm-hmm. There's a difference. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like you just love what you love. There's no rhyme or reason for it. It's just you do, and the best thing is when you can explain it, but sometimes you just can't.
Right. Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
It's just like this attachment, and especially when it began so long ago and was sort of just like snuffed.
Yeah, yeah.
I think,
and there is a power
maybe it almost hurt, made things worse that the mother was like, oh, let's let them go on one date. Mm-hmm. It's sort of like,
right, because her mother even, she's like taking pictures, and she was like, I want her to have nice memories.
I want her to have a nice memory of this, and it's like they had a fantastic time, and then it's just like, boom, we're moving tomorrow.
Right.
Bye.
Yeah, and even in that scene when they're, I guess, done with their quote unquote date, like, she's asleep on him, and
she's asleep on him, yeah.
And you could see that she obviously trusts him and that she loves him. They're holding they have their fingers entwined, and he's awake. It's almost like he's watching over her, and he's looking out the car window,
like at
which
the
he
end.
does at the like he does at the end. So I wondered. It just felt like she was living her most true life with Hae Sung, but
for me, it was her emotions were strongest when she was with him.
Yes.
But as far as what things that she wanted, what she wanted out of her life, it wasn't with him. Her ambitions. But if she had had a chance to be with him, do you think that the story would be different? And he sort of brings this up at the bar. I wonder what life would have been like if you hadn't left Korea. Would we have been married? Would we have broken? Would we have dated? Would we have broken up? Would we have had children? Like, this is all stuff that he's still clinging to. Yeah.
And that she probably just, like you said, just snuffed it out and didn't think about it. But having him there in front of her saying these things, it has to be impactful.
Yeah. I mean, it's seriously.
He's opening a door that she has long lost the key to.
Imagining what might have been is
a sure way to get crazy.
Yeah. It's fun, but it's also extremely dangerous. It could ruin you.
Yeah. So is that what she's feeling at the end? Is she sad about this loss of Hae Sung, or is she sad about this loss of the nostalgia of life in Korea, of what her life was as that young girl? Because she also mentions they're talking and she says to him, I left that young girl with you. Mm-hmm. She was always with him. So in a way, she's sort of reinforcing that she does love him without saying it. But again, like, is him leaving, is it really like tearing down those walls and removing those layers and really making her see what this relationship is or was? Obviously, it can't go anywhere, and it's not going to, because she's not leaving her husband and he's not going to wreck her marriage.
Yeah. Well, I mean, she says she left the little girl with him, but at the end, the little girl was crying. There with her the entire time. She was crying.
Right.
Yeah. So this is just, those are the tears she should have shed when she was little.
All right. Anything else you want to add?
No. Let's wrap this up.
You're done talking about this film.
It's almost an hour.
Yeah. I like dissecting this. I felt like there was a lot to unpack here, and it's not tidy.
No, it's like I said, this is a complicated story.
It is.
That's what makes it good.
Yeah.
The fact that it is complicated. It's not this predictable saccharine Hollywood romance.
No, it's not. It's just messy.
It's about feelings and regrets and
loss,
basically
longing, love,
loss and acceptance,
and love.
And love, yeah.
Yeah. No, it was really good. So you gave it a 7, right?
Yeah, I changed it to 7.
I gave it an 8.5. One of your other favorite movies, remember? 8.5.
Get the hell out of here.
You love Fellini.
Pretentious garbage.
We're gonna get hate mail now.
Yeah. All the Fellini contingent. That's it. We won't listen to this podcast anymore.
All right. If you get a chance, again, I think it's still playing in theaters. You can check it out on Showtime. If you have the app, I'm super jealous. Check it out there. Absolutely do yourself a favor and check out Celine Song's just beautiful, beautiful, heartbreakingly beautiful Past Lives from 2023. And that's it from us, and we will bid you all a
good night.
Good night.